What is the biggest philosophical problem of the last 100 years? According to the atheist YouTuber Alex O'Connor, it's something called the non-identity problem, which was first proposed in the 80s and has continued to puzzle philosophers ever since. Now, since in this channel I like to see how ancient wisdom can be used to shed light on modern problems in philosophy, I was thrilled to see that O'Connor made a video on this topic, and then at the end of his video, issued a challenge.
And what's the answer? Well, this is philosophy, so of course, nobody knows. But do let us know if you work it out.
The reason I was so excited to hear this is because, well, as it turns out, I think I've worked it out. Now, don't go accusing me of hubris quite yet, though, because I'm not claiming to be the first person to have worked out a solution to the non-identity problem. Instead, I'm going to suggest that a solution to this problem is implicit in the philosophy of the medieval philosopher and theologian Thomas Aquinas. In fact, I'm going to suggest that this problem is really only a problem if you reject Aquinas' ethical theory, and that part of the reason the non-identity problem is so new is that it depends entirely on a specific view of ethics that has become popular in the last 100 years or so. But before I reveal what modern ethical system I'm talking about, and how Aquinas' ethics can sidestep this non-identity problem entirely, let's get down what the non-identity problem actually is. Here's what O'Connor has to say about it.
Have you ever wondered what your life would be like if you were born 150 years ago, or even more, with a different society, different friends, different parents? What would your life have been like if you were born in, say, Victorian London, for example, or ancient Egypt? Well, I've constructed an immersive visual to show you exactly what that would be like. That's right, it's a trick question. If you weren't conceived exactly when you actually were, then you simply wouldn't exist. I mean, sure, your parents could have conceived a child 2 months later than they did, but that child wouldn't be you. Because you are a specific sperm and egg cell combination. If your parents had waited even a short amount of time, it's not that you would have been born later, it's that someone else would have been conceived in your place.
So basically, your existence is very, very contingent. If you didn't come into being at the exact moment you did, you wouldn't really be you. And yeah, I think this is good philosophy. If who you are is dependent on your DNA, and your DNA is the direct result of a specific sperm and egg combination, then any other combination would mean that you wouldn't exist. So far, so good. Where this gets interesting is how O'Connor applies this principle to particular situations and gets some apparently paradoxical conclusions. First, O'Connor imagines that there's a pregnant woman who is so desperate for attention that she deliberately takes a pill that she knows will harm her unborn child to ensure that the child is born disabled, allowing her to get all the attention that comes with being the mother of a disabled child. Obviously, if something like this were to happen, we would say that the mother has harmed her child, and that what she did is morally wrong. Seems simple enough, right? Well, not exactly, because O'Connor then imagines another case which is similar to the first, but substantially different. Let's watch him explain it.
Imagine you meet a woman who isn't pregnant, but wants to conceive a child. But she also has a rare medical condition. Doctors tell her that if she conceives a child right now, that child will be born with a disability and spend his entire life in a wheelchair. There's no cure for this condition, but fortunately, the condition is only temporary and it always goes away completely after 1 month. So if she conceives a child right now, he'll be disabled. But if she waits just 1 month to conceive a child, then that child will be born completely able-bodied. But this woman also loves attention, and she knows she'll get a lot of it if she has a disabled child. So she intentionally conceives a child as soon as possible while the condition is active, rather than waiting, in order to make sure that her child will be disabled.
So we have these two cases, one where a woman intentionally harms her preborn child, and another where she intentionally conceives a child at a time when it is guaranteed to be born disabled, when she could have waited only a few weeks and have it be born not disabled, again for the sole motive of getting the attention that comes with being the mother of a disabled child. Obviously, we want to be able to say that both of these women are doing horribly evil things, but here's where we run into a bit of a paradox. After all, as we said earlier, if you weren't conceived at the exact moment you were conceived, you wouldn't exist. So in a real sense, the child of the second woman wouldn't have existed if his mother hadn't conceived him exactly when she did. Strange as it may seem, that child owes his very being to his mother's self-centered decision to conceive a child guaranteed to be born disabled for the sake of attention. So here's O'Connor's paradox in a nutshell. We want to be able to say that what both women did is bad, but while the first woman clearly harmed her child with her actions, the same can't be said of the second woman, since her child wouldn't even exist if she had acted differently. Therefore, if morality is all about not doing harm to people, we can't say that the second woman did anything morally bad, since, unlike the first woman, she didn't harm anyone. And we just have to say that our moral intuitions are in error here, and what the second woman did is actually okay. This is a really compelling paradox, but if you paid close attention to my summary that I just gave, you might have started to see where this paradox, this argument, goes wrong. Specifically, I said that the argument presupposes the idea that morality is all about not doing harm to other people. But this, I think, is an assumption that really shouldn't be granted. After all, it presupposes a specific theory of ethics known as consequentialism, which says that all that matters when making moral decisions are the consequences of those decisions. Under this view, if a decision produces overall good results, it's a good one, and if it produces bad results, it's a morally bad decision. If an action harms someone, then it's bad, and if it doesn't harm someone, it's good. So, because the actions of the first woman can be said to have harmed her unborn child, then what she did was bad. But with the second woman, she can't be said to have harmed anyone, so under consequentialism, she can't be said to have done anything wrong. Hence the paradox. So under consequentialism, the non-identity problem clearly creates paradoxes. But is that true for every ethical system? In other words, what's the alternative? Here, I think, is where St. Thomas Aquinas can shed some light on this matter. Before the modern era, the dominant ethical theory was a view known as virtue ethics, and Aquinas was a firm believer in virtue ethics. Indeed, I think it's probably fair to say that he had the most fleshed out understanding of virtue ethics of any ancient or medieval thinker. What makes virtue ethics different from consequentialism is that it doesn't only focus on the external consequences of an action, but it looks also at how an action might affect someone's internal personal character. And really, when you get down to it, that's the only question that really matters in virtue ethics. How will this action that I'm considering right now shape my internal character? Will it make me a more virtuous person or a less virtuous person? Will it shape me into the kind of person I'm meant to be, or will it shape me into a bad person? There's two basic ideas that underline this theory. First, there's the idea that human beings have natures, and it's in conforming to our natures that we become truly happy, and that we live a truly morally good life. Second, there's the idea that we're creatures of habit, and that good human beings are therefore ones who build good habits, or habits that will help us better align with our natural purpose and our nature. And how do we build good habits? Well, by doing good actions, which are understood to be actions which contribute to our flourishing as the kind of things that we're meant to be by our natures. So let's apply this theory to the non-identity problem and see what happens. Under this view, what's most important for determining whether the actions of the mother who intentionally conceived a disabled child are wrong isn't what the result of her actions were, but the kind of effect that these actions will have on her moral formation. It doesn't so much matter in our moral analysis that her actions led to her child coming into existence, which is a very good result. It matters more that she conceived her child with the express purpose of creating a disabled child to act as her trophy, thereby building the habit of seeing other human beings as means to satisfy her own desires, which is a bad thing. In other words, the problem isn't so much the harm caused to the child, but the harm caused to the woman's soul by seeking to create a human being merely for her own personal fulfillment. So, this view allows us to say that this woman's actions are still morally bad, even if she hasn't really harmed her child, since it allows us to say that morality is about more than just harm. Okay, so it looks like taking Aquinas' view of virtue ethics over consequentialism allows us to diffuse the first of O'Connor's paradoxes. But what if we broadened out the scope of the problem? What if, instead of talking about one particular woman and her child, we talked about society as a whole and all of its future generations? This brings us to O'Connor's second paradox, which relates to how we should use our resources as a society. Let's see how O'Connor sets the groundwork for this problem.
Suppose we have some limited resources as a society. Policy A is conservation of these resources. Policy B is depletion of these resources. If we choose conservation, that means that we carefully conserve our resources, spending them wisely and ensuring that our quality of life steadily increases over time for the next 1,000 years. If we choose depletion, we simply deplete all of our resources. And this causes our quality of life right now to go up slightly higher than it would have been if we chose conservation for about 200 years. But after that 200 years, because we were so rash in using up all of our resources, the quality of life in society will drop significantly below where it would have been if we chose conservation.
So, the question, do we choose conservation and preserve our resources for future generations? Or do we choose depletion and use up all of the resources we have right now in order to benefit ourselves, even though it will harm future generations? Well, O'Connor goes on to argue, according to the logic of the non-identity problem, we should choose depletion, since a policy of that kind of magnitude, the kind of magnitude of deciding how your entire society is structured, will almost certainly entail that children will be conceived at different times than they would have been otherwise, meaning that these children will be the products of different egg and sperm combinations than they would have been otherwise, meaning that they will in fact be different people than they would have been otherwise, meaning in turn that no one could be said to be harmed by us choosing to deplete our resources instead of conserving them, since all of the future people who would have benefited from us saving resources from them just wouldn't end up existing if we decided to use all our resources now. Yeah, it's a bit heady and a bit abstract, but hopefully you can see why this is a paradox. After all, most of us, I would assume, would at least want to say that we should save some of our resources for the next generation, but according to the argument we just gave, not saving our resources for the next generation doesn't harm anyone. So why should we bother? Well, maybe because doing the right thing is about more than just not harming people. Maybe it's more about forming yourself as a person. Maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't use up all of the world's resources in a few short years, not so much out of a concern about harming particular future people, but from a concern about not building bad, wasteful habits that encourage us to see the world as something for us to take in, chew to pieces, and then spit back out. This, I think, is exactly how Thomas Aquinas would answer this question. He would say that O'Connor is going about ethics all wrong. Doing the right thing, Aquinas would say, isn't just about not harming people, but about building virtuous habits. This would allow him to say that we shouldn't deplete our resources even if we wouldn't be harming anyone by doing that. The paradox of the non-identity problem, then, is seemingly just a natural result of abandoning a virtue theory of ethics. If you say that actions can be evil simply because they damage the personal character of the actor, and not because they harm anyone in particular, then you can sidestep the whole paradox. In conclusion, then, maybe the non-identity problem should make us reconsider how we think about consequentialism. If consequentialism allows for seemingly unsolvable problems like this one, then maybe we should go back to an ethical theory that avoids these kind of pitfalls, like Aquinas' virtue ethics. That's at least what I would say. But regardless of what you think of this claim, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel to help me grow. Thank you for watching, and God bless.